What is up? What is up, everybody? This is Dr. Andrew Kim, MD. I am a board certified psychiatrist. Thank you for checking out my YouTube channel and thank you for joining me. If you're up right now and if you're a viewer here, thank you for joining the Insomniacs Livestream. We do this every single Tuesday night and Saturday night at 10:30 Central, 11:30 Eastern. And I see a few people here already. So Dennis, thank you for joining. Appreciate it. So, what are we talking about today on our show? So, today is going to be more of a reaction episode, I guess, because Mel Gibson has resurfaced on the Joe Rogan podcast. And let me preface this by saying, really liked a lot of Mel Gibson films. So, Braveheart, forever in my mind, Mel Gibson's going to be Braveheart, the guy from the Lethal Weapon series, right? So props to Mel Gibson. Loved some of his movies. But unfortunately, I'm going to be saying some critical remarks today about some of Mel Gibson's comments on the Joe Rogan podcast. And obviously, most people in the world are familiar with the Joe Rogan podcast. It is a very entertaining podcast by all means. He has interesting guests, but there are a lot of controversial things that are said. And I guess it kind of raises the question, which we'll be kind of talking about in the background. Leveraging platforms, right? When you have that much reach in somewhat concerning ways, right? Somewhat, I will say, even maybe irresponsible ways sometimes. But look, by all means, this is America. People have freedom of speech. People are entrepreneurial. You can use your platforms however you like, but I also think it's important to have counterpoints. There's freedom of speech to disagree. And today I am going to be disagreeing with some of the points that were brought up on Mel Gibson's episode of the Joe Rogan Experience of the Joe Rogan podcast. So remember, we have a text line where you could text in comments as well if you want to text in and also potentially call into the show. But please feel free, if you're here, to type in your chats in the live chat comment. Dennis says, Doc, are you familiar with the work of Dr. Thomas Seyfried? He works in the area of metabolic oncology. No, I'm not. Dennis says, according to the metabolic theory of cancer, the mutations and all other hallmarks of cancer are downstream effects occurring from disturbances of cellular energy and of cellular energy metabolism. That's interesting. I'll have to go check out. Obviously, because I'm a psychiatrist, oncology is not my area of expertise, but I'll have to go check that out. And I mean, I could see how for certain cancers, right off the top of my head, I would say that makes sense. I mean, sometimes some of our interventions, right, are aimed at shutting down metabolism itself. We're trying to also alter cancer tumor cells' ability to replicate. We induce something called autophagy, right? So to basically have those cells basically kill themselves, trigger things like apoptosis, which is killing cells. So definitely, I mean, I think there definitely is a link to disturbances of cellular energy metabolism. And a lot of the even theoretical treatments are aimed at altering tumor cells, mitochondria, etc. So definitely, Dennis. So thank you for joining in. Dennis is one of our regular listeners here. So why don't we go ahead, and we're going to have two halves of today's episode. First half, Mel Gibson said some interesting things about cancer, as was listed in kind of the header description of our video today. And the second half, Mel Gibson actually even dived into some mental health issues. And I've kind of hinted at this before, and I really don't like getting into too much bashing of other folks, but you know what? Rather than beating around the bush, we're going to talk about the Amen clinics today, because Mel Gibson brought in his direct anecdotal experience of going to one of Dr. Daniel Amen's clinics, or the Amen clinics, which is a very well-known multi-location, multi-site clinic where there's basically clinics at most major cities in the US at this point. And Mel Gibson actually went into an anecdote of his experience of going there and getting a SPECT scan and some of the recommendations he was given. So I think that will spark a very interesting conversation. So for those of you joining, our episode will be divided into those two halves. So first off, Let me see. I'm going to see here if I can queue up a clip from the Joe Rogan podcast, from the video podcast. I'm going to play a clip here. First clip we're going to go through, spend the first half on, are the comments that Mel Gibson made about medications that are not really known to be used right now as standard of care for cancer treatments, but make some pretty bold and broad and vague, in my opinion, claims about a couple things. So let's take a look. Let's see. So for Dennis or others who are here, let me know if you can hear the audio on this when I cue this up. And hopefully it works. My first time tinkering around with OBS with videos on my desktop here. But let's take a look here. Let me cue it up. And once it starts playing, let me know if you can or can't hear him so I know that we're good to go and play the whole clip. Here we go.
Which is fucking insane because they wanted to promote that vaccine because they wanted to profit off of it, which brings us back again to evil. Mm-hmm. Evil's real. Mm-hmm. It's real. Putting money over human lives is evil.
I agree.
It's a real thing, and there's a temptation to do it too, which is even more crazy.
Yeah. I don't believe that there is anything that can afflict mankind that hasn't got a natural cure for it. I think that there has to be. It just makes sense to me. Now, I couldn't prove that, but I just believe that.
Yeah.
That there's got to be something that cures things. And I'll tell you a good story.
Okay.
I have 3 friends. All 3 of them had stage 4 cancer. All 3 of them don't have cancer right now at all. And they had some serious stuff going on.
And what did they take?
Jesus. They took some, what you've heard they've taken.
Ivermectin.
Febendazole.
Febendazole, yeah.
That's
yeah, I'm hearing that a lot.
They drank hydrochloride something or other.
There's studies on that now where people have proven that
people are drinking methylene blue and stuff like that.
Yeah, methylene blue, which was a fabric dye.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a textile dye. And now they find out it has profound effects on your mitochondria.
Yep.
Yeah.
This stuff works, man.
There's a lot of stuff that does work, which is very strange because, again, it's profit. When you hear about things that are demonized and that turn out to be effective, you always wonder, well, what is going on here? Mm-hmm. How is our medical institutions, how have they failed us so that things that do cure you are not promoted because they're not profitable? That they can't control it. They don't have a patent on it, whether it's vitamin D, K2, and magnesium, you know.
Well, yeah. I'm
zinc and quercetin.
I do all that stuff.
I do all that stuff.
Did you do the Brecca thing?
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for the feedback and letting me know you can hear that. So you heard what was said there, right? Mel Gibson said, I got 3 friends. 3. Stage 4 cancer. None of them got him anymore. Right? Then starts talking about febendazole, ivermectin, right? Methylene blue, and hydrochloro something, couldn't even name it. At first, he almost made it sound like a big secret when Joe Rogan said, what did they take? He's like, you know. Right, glad KG 10 to the 5 says glad Mel has 3 friends. I know the story's already suspect right there when he said he has 3 friends. Right? So KG, you're funny, man. But look, right? I mean, almost like this, secret society, F the government, F the industrial complex, F the pharma industry, right? It's just kind of like they're taking advantage of the psychology of it's like it's us against them, right? And I know, look, there's merit to that because, it is about the 1%, controlling most of the things in our country. It really is, right? I don't disagree with that. But the funny part is, right, Mel Gibson and Joe are part of that 1%. I don't know if they're somewhat obtuse to that. So it's funny that people with all this wealth talking about customized treatments that you could just, purchase on your own if you have enough cash. So here's the thing, right? The concerning things that I have here, right? And let me be crystal clear to all the listeners here. You've heard me before. If something works, and if something is truly effective and balanced with effective and safe for humans, for patients that are ill. Why would I, as a physician, be against it? Right? Why? Of course I'm not. But it concerns me when someone who has such a reach, such a large listener base, and I know part of it is this is how he's gotten so well known and made his money as an entrepreneur and as a media presence. I get it. But I'm just saying it concerns me, right? When you bring on a guest like this, Mel Gibson, who's not a healthcare expert, and basically just giving you the vaguest anecdotes in the world. Let's just break it down line by line, right? I got 3 friends. They all had stage 4 cancer. Okay. How do we know this is true? What kinds of cancer? Every cancer is so different. You're not going to treat breast cancer the same that the way that you would treat bladder cancer, prostate cancer, a tumor in the brain. There's numerous types of tumors of the brain. Some are benign, some are deadly. Pancreatic cancer. These are all so different in nature, right? But you got 3 friends. They all have stage 4 cancer. You don't know exactly what type. Did they take the ivermectin, the febendazole, the methylene blue, the hydrochloro something in isolation? And that was their only treatment that a sane physician and a reputable physician and oncologist would prescribe them? Or was that taken in addition to standard chemotherapy, radiation, other anti-cancer agents that are FDA approved for treating the specific appropriate cancers, right? We know none of this. So first off, I'm just kind of poking holes in the premise of this, right? Ray LA, thanks for joining. Ray says, should people be prohibited to try something if they want but can't because it's not allowed to get a prescription? Adults can do whatever they want, Ray. Right? You know, and I don't judge. Look, people do what they have to do to survive. People do what they have to do to try to help themselves, help their loved ones. Right? I mean, I personally know patients of mine where they say it's more affordable for them to order meds from a different country, and they do it, and they would get it in bulk. You know, do I question what the quality control will be on that? If they know exactly what they're getting, if it's the same as standard FDA-approved generic manufacturer, I mean, I have no clue, but I get it. People do what they have to do. I mean, so that's my opinion on that, right? My concern is really more about, not about people trying treatments that aren't FDA approved. Because here's the thing, right? In the field of psychiatry, I'm a psychiatrist. Most of the things I do, like I wouldn't say a good portion, maybe even half of what I do on a day-to-day basis, I prescribe things that are what are called off-label. And the term off-label means I'm using a medication for a purpose that is not specifically FDA approved for that purpose. So let me give you an example of that, Ray, just to kind of I'll piggyback off your comment before we go back to Mel Gibson and these cancer comments. For example, some of you maybe here have taken a medication called trazodone, Trazodone, trazodone. And trazodone right now in the year 2025, and for the last couple decades, honestly, is most well known as a medication that family medicine doctors, so your primary care doctors or psychiatrists like myself, will prescribe as a non-addictive sleep aid. So we give it to folks who say, I'm having troubles getting to sleep and having early insomnia, or trouble staying asleep in the middle of the night and having awakenings, right? So we try to give it to them to help them get to sleep faster, stay asleep through the night. And it's just accepted as a commonly prescribed medicine. You probably, if you asked around, you're going to find someone who says, yes, I've been prescribed trazodone for my insomnia. But here's the funny part. You go look it up. There is not an FDA approval for trazodone to be used for insomnia. It's not. If you go look it up, you'll find that it is FDA approved to be used as an antidepressant. It was an antidepressant that was used similarly to how Prozac and Zoloft and Lexapro and blah, 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 all these things are used, even predating Prozac. So this is like pre-1980s. You're talking 70s. Okay, it fell out of favor because some people were saying, yes, some people said it doesn't work, but other people said it helped my depression. But I'm not as depressed, but now I'm sleepy all day, right? So that's an example of we have now leveraged some of the chemical properties and principles of a medication and harnessed its side effects. So it's as weird as it sounds, we are prescribing it to give people the actual side effect. We're giving you the side effect and leveraging that side effect to our benefit. That's an example of off-label use. So just really giving that context, I know that went on a tangent to just kind of illustrate to you the concept of trying out things within the realm of reason, even if the FDA, quote unquote, didn't officially give us the green light. Physicians do that all the time. Okay. My concern here with Mel Gibson's quotes is kind of this vague intonation that, oh, these are effective cures. Sildenafil was originally an off-label ED med, correct, KG? Very correct. You're absolutely right. And look how widespread sildenafil is now. Exactly. So I think the balance is, and I'm going to try to give you somewhat balanced presentation about some of the comments that Mel Gibson made. There's grains of truth to some of the comments, but there's also there's got to be a slow your roll kind of deal, and that's the part I have a hard time with. It's almost kind of they're almost kind of laying the seeds of conspiracy theories that somehow the medical pharma industrial complex, hospitals, physicians, pharma, the government are holding back cures for cancer. And that is a really divisive stance to take. And trust me, look, you've heard me on previous episodes, guys. For the longtime listeners, you know me by now that I don't think our healthcare system is wonderful. I've given you even my pseudo conspiracy theories about pharma, right, and social engineering. So you know where I'm coming from. But there's also a danger in saying that, almost planting the seeds that like people who are truly trying to help other people, like physicians, hospitals, most of them, I would say most they're hardworking, they have a good paying job, they want to help people. They're not there to purposely screw and hold back cures from society. That's just not the case. Okay. So let's break down some of the comments, right? I mean, all this is publicly searchable knowledge. Let's walk through them one by one, right? So he talks about ivermectin. I'm not even going to get deep into ivermectin. You guys know ivermectin has been all over the news since the pandemic, right? Trump, everybody, Joe Rogan promoting ivermectin throughout the entire pandemic to battle COVID. And there's either been mixed results or no great results, from well-run studies showing that it should be, some kind of first-line treatment for that. Now, so Mel Gibson's referring to ivermectin and anti-cancer properties. And if you do even a cursory search, right, you will find journal articles that say there are potential theoretical uses of ivermectin to kill cancer. Keywords: cell lines, okay? If you go look up febendazole, which is an antiparasitic agent, right? Typically used by vets. You will find it'll say febendazole. Evidence for, again, having some anti-cancer properties to kill off tumor/cancer cell lines in vitro. Okay. If you look up methylene blue is literally used as an industrial dye. Okay. Typically in the medical field, methylene blue is used for, mapping of the lymph nodes to actually help visualize and map out lymph nodes to detect cancer spreading, oftentimes for, like breast cancers, upper torso cancers. It's used to treat a few other things. And again, if you look up enough in journals, you'll find that there is some evidence that methylene blue, combined with certain phototherapies, there may be some potential to target cancer cells more efficiently without damaging healthy cells, right? So all of the above, I want to be clear, if you were to look them up, These are the types of things you would find in certain journals. Okay. Here's my concern. My concern is the following. If you look at any of these articles, it does not take a genius. Okay. You don't have to be a PhD. You don't have to be a clinical researcher. You don't have to be a physician, a nurse practitioner, a nurse, whatever, to read these journals, even read the abstracts. And the vast majority of these are like bench science research. Okay. And most of these are done in cell lines, literally isolated tumor cells, literally isolated spleen cells, liver cells, essentially in like petri dishes. Some don't even have very extensive studies in animal, like actual live animals. Some have barely started to do that in animal models. Most of these are literally done in just cellular models in cells, okay? And most of them conclude, and again, it's clear as day, you can go read these journals, hey, it's promising on this cellular level, intracellularly. We probably should study this in animals. We probably should study this maybe in humans at some point, once we have more data. That is the extent of the research in all of these when it's meant for, the realm of oncology or anti-cancer properties. Again, so I'm not saying, hey, we should never look into these things. It's really, you heard the video, right? Mel Gibson, maybe he didn't verbatim say these are all proven cures. I think he was somewhat careful, right? With his words, he was using first he didn't even want to name these things, but then he just committed because he's like, well, I'm on the Rogan podcast, so I might as well say the sexy things, right? Ivermectin, methylene, blue, febendazole, right? The trendy stuff. He was careful, right? At first he didn't want to name them. He's also careful not to say, I know that these are all proven effective here, but you heard the body language, you heard the nonverbal stuff, right? You saw the nonverbal stuff. Joe Rogan just piling on. Oh, yeah. When you've proven cures, careful in his words too, right? He didn't say ivermectin is a cure for, methylene blue is a cure for, but idealized the theoretical properties and then went into how these are being suppressed, right? I just think it's dangerous, guys. I just think it's dangerous because I think that's, honestly, I'll take it a step further. I think that's predatory. I think it's predatory to sell false hope to people who are suffering. And I get it. I'm not obtuse, guys, right? There's a selective audience you turn in because you kind of like their style and you like their approach. I get it, right? So I know that it's not, you're just going to get some rando stranger who's like never listened to the Rogan podcast and they're going to hate on them. It's probably not the case, but I'm just saying, what if some of their listeners have some type of cancer or advanced cancer and you're selling them a false bag of goods? Ray LA says, who is going to pay for these extremely expensive studies in humans if there's no patent potential? Good point, Ray. We'll talk about that in a second, because I'm going to talk about another angle about that. Everyone is suppressing this kind of deal, right? So here's the thing. Again, I'm not an oncology expert. I just know I'm smart enough and I'm rational enough, like many of you listeners, that was oversold, right? That was oversold, and that's dangerous. You don't want to be playing on people's fears. You don't want to be playing and giving false hope to people. Imagine you have stage 4 whatever cancer, and you listen to something like this, or now because it's trending online, you see more garbage articles on stupid blogs come up, and that gives you false hope to then talk to your doctor. Your doctor says, You want me to give you what? Febendazole? Show me one single study that says it's helpful or even safe. Forget helpful, just safe for us to do that. Right? And then the doctor says no, right? And then now it's going to ruin the rapport and the trust between the two people. Why are you holding me back? I mean, it's just, I just don't see much good coming out of something like this. All right? That's what concerns me and really irked me about those comments from Mel Gibson. It's just, I don't know what it is. What is the motive? You want to sound cool with a story? You want to say something controversial? You want to get clicks and likes? You want to be relevant again? You want to be the healthcare guru, just like Tom Cruise thought he was a guru about anti-psychiatry, that depression's fake, that postpartum depression's fake. I mean, I don't know. What is the deal? And let's go to Ray LA's point. So who's going to pay for these extremely expensive studies in humans if there's no patent potential, right? So to Joe Rogan's point, right? Let's roll with that, right? You know, there's some grain of truth to it, right? If there's no money to be made, then no one's going to invest in it, right? So I don't argue. So you have a valid point there, Ray, and a valid concern. And I think Joe Rogan had concern. But this idea that these are purposely being suppressed, I actually disagree with that. Okay, and you've heard me before. You guys have heard me. Dennis, the regular listeners, you've heard me in my stance. Pharma is not altruistic. They're a business. They're about making money. If they could make $1 billion selling lemonade, they would switch businesses and sell lemonade in a heartbeat. Okay? So I know pharma is not altruistic. So I'll be the first to say that. But listen to me. Just follow my logic. Okay? Ray, to your point, I'm going to give you several examples. Okay? If there was truly potential, and I'm not saying there isn't, I'm just saying if there was high confidence potential for these drugs, which have been around forever, I'm not saying I could say with 100% certainty that these have been studied to the full extent that they should have been. But if there's money to be made, these pharma companies would have funded the research for ivermectin and febendazole. Or if there is potential, they will in the next few years. That's my comment. And here's what I mean, okay? My comment about how pharma is not altruistic and they're all about making money supports my theory right now and goes against what Rogan is saying. Pharma companies don't care about savvy pharmacologists and scientists being able to see through them. They just know if we can just convince the public that what we got is the best thing in the world, they could care less about the science and the logic, and they'll pay for it and they'll demand it. Like, here's an example. We talked about it last episode when we were talking about ketamine and psilocybin and all these different things. I told you about one company, right? They came out with a recently FDA-approved medication called Auvelity, Auvelity, right? The main ingredient in Auvelity is bupropion, which is generic Wellbutrin. It's been generic forever, for decades. So now a bunch of factories make bupropion less than a penny per pill, right? There's no more mega bucks in bupropion. So why would they research a cheap pill that they don't have exclusive patents on then, Ray, right? Well, what they did was they mixed bupropion and they took a generic dextromethorphan. You've heard of dextromethorphan. It's a cough suppressant that's been around forever, something that you can't exclusively patent. They took dextromethorphan and they mixed it with generic bupropion or Wellbutrin. And they said, hey, we got this brand new exclusively patented drug called Auvelity. Now you got to pay $900 a month for it, insurance company. So insurance company, pay us $1,000 a month so that this patient could get this new thing, right? Dextromethorphan, which has existed forever, bupropion, which has existed forever. We just happen to put them both in the same tablet at different ratios, right? So all I'm saying, right, let's look at Lexapro and Celexa. Those are two separate SSRIs. When the patent for Celexa was running out, they said, let's flip a carbon chain from one side to the other. And now let's call it Lexapro. And now we got an exclusive patent on this thing called Lexapro because Celexa's patent ran out. And now we got another 10-year runway, right? So all I'm saying, Ray, is it wouldn't be beneath any of these companies to study ivermectin, methylene blue, febendazole, and say, hey, you know what? We're going to toss in some whatever, vitamin D. We're going to flip one carbon chain. We're going to mix ivermectin with Tylenol, and we're going to call it something new. And now we're going to charge insurance companies $5,000 a month for this life-saving anti-cancer treatment. So there is a pathway. There is a pathway for funding. Pharma, who has tons of money, could easily study these things if they felt confident that any of these showed some promise, because that's what they would do. That's what they would do. I mean, I can give you a list of 15 more examples off the top of my head. I don't want to bore you guys as the audience. We're going off on a tangent. But it's just to the point that I disagree with that particular comment. Again, I don't think pharma folks are angelic or altruistic. I'm just saying it's the logic of they are so greedy. If they could leverage ivermectin and methylene blue and febendazole, they would be the first to do it. Literally, they would be the first to do it. Look at the profit margin. Think about it, guys. When you go to CVS, when you go to Walgreens, when you go to Walmart, what does CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart want you to buy? They want you to buy the Walgreens branded acetaminophen, right? They don't want you to buy Benadryl. They want you to buy the Walgreens, CVS, Walmart branded diphenhydramine, generic Benadryl, right? So even when we're talking about over-the-counters, forget pharma and prescription-grade meds. There's profit to be made with over-the-counters. The markup, the margin for some of those, for Walgreens branded acetaminophen or ibuprofen, the markup is sometimes 1,000%. I could be underestimated. Someone go use AI right now. Someone go to ChatGPT and look up the margins or the markup rate for pharmacy branded acetaminophen or ibuprofen or diphenhydramine. Maybe I'm off by 500% in either direction. It's like 500%, 1,000%. I'm just telling you there is massive margin. There's margins even for over-the-counters, let alone margins for generic meds if you're savvy and you're smart as an entrepreneur. So all I'm saying, Ray, is the theory that Joe Rogan says has tons of holes in it. There's money to be made if you're just a good businessman. And so there's if these showed any promise, or if they show any promise in the near future, not to sound pessimistic, someone's gonna fund it, and someone's gonna figure out a way to make it more expensive, patent it, etc. Trust me. Human greed knows no bounds, is all I'm saying. That's human nature. All right. Now, look, last few comments here, right? For those of you, KG 10 to the 5, 378% markup. So I was a little off. I told you, I said I could be 500% off. If you're a private mom and pop business, right? Okay, look, some of you are better entrepreneurs than me. I'm the worst entrepreneur in the world. I'm a good psychiatrist, not a good entrepreneur. Okay, right? I mean, what's a healthy profit margin to be sustainable? What's like what is is it a 20% margin, right? If you can make a 20% margin on the goods that you sell in your mom and pop store at your independent store, right? I mean, you tell me. I could be off there too, but I know that's a damn healthy markup, right? That's a damn healthy margin. 378%. That's what I'm saying. These people are making money left and right. So trust me, if there's profit to be made with any of those 3 compounds, those medications, someone's going to make it. Ray, I can get to that in a little bit. So if you stick around, I don't think dextromethorphan's medicinal properties come from its dissociative qualities. We've actually shown, I guess, piggybacking off of last episode, even with ketamine, there's a misconception that ketamine or S-ketamine, that the dissociation itself is what leads to its antidepressant properties. No, it's actually not. That's been disproven. Anyone who says otherwise is likely, I'm going to just say it, they're likely someone who got a certificate in psychedelic assisted therapy. And for me to say something as controversial as like, it's not the dissociation itself that brings you the antidepressant property, they're going to vehemently disagree because it would somewhat almost marginalize what they're doing and what they got a certificate for. Right. So Lisa, yeah, I told you. So I don't know when you joined, Lisa. I said there are tons. I wouldn't say tons. There are plenty of studies on methylene blue, febendazole, ivermectin, all 3. But go again and read. The vast majority of the studies are in vitro studies or cell line studies, meaning they take a cancer cell, put it in a petri dish. They take a healthy spleen cell, put it in a petri dish, and sees what happens. Not when the human is living, the animal is living. So here's the problem with that, right? And I'm not bashing that as a starting point, but to go from that to make the claims that Mel Gibson makes, that's my concern. Because here's what I mean. My next comment, I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, being in clinical research in the psychiatric field for about 5-6 years, if we predicated, yes, exactly on the study, yes. So if we predicated our conclusions based off animal studies, or let's take it one step back, cellular studies, right? In vitro cell line studies, we would be so much farther in the field of psychiatry right now. Because here's what I can tell you. Let's even take it one step above in vitro cell line studies, right? It's if we based our conclusions off of even animal model studies, we would have eradicated certain addictions by now. We would have eradicated certain subtypes of depression by now. We would have eradicated even, certain types of cognitive dysfunction, even Alzheimer's, honestly. But unfortunately, when you take it beyond some of these animal models into human models, we see higher rates of toxicity. We don't see the same efficacy and results. Sometimes we don't even see anything close to it. Sometimes we get lucky and we do. Meaning there is a huge leap to go from cell line studies to animal studies and animal to human. I mean, it is a huge leap. And right now, with the advent of AI, some of these drug companies out there, they have catalogs. I kid you not. What they do is they patent, with bench science, they patent tens of thousands of compounds. And you have these compounds that are sitting in compound catalogs. They literally just sit there in catalogs, right? And they don't have the time and energy. Pharma, meaning big pharma, established pharma. They don't even have time and the energy and the resources to go study these things. They literally will license them out, and they will let the little guy take the risk. Okay. We don't have time today, but literally one of the more recent FDA-approved antipsychotics for schizophrenia was a compound that major pharma had just sitting in a catalog collecting dust. And then you had a startup come and say, hey, can we license that from you? We'll pay you an upfront fee to run some preclinical and early studies. And if it gets FDA approved, then you can get involved and you can get your royalties and you can get your cut. And this is how pharma operates these days. They've actually given up on a lot of their in-house R&D. They actually let other people take the risk. Think about that, right? We just sit there with our bench scientists and we patent tens of thousands of compounds. We have the exclusive rights to them. We sit there. will let small companies, startups, entrepreneurial people who are willing to take a risk, let them do the heavy lifting in the beginning, take the risks, invest tons of money, and if it fails, that's on them. We still got some like upfront fee, and we got to learn more about the compound and just go along for the ride. But if it's successful, we get a cut, and we get some royalties, and we get some recurring revenue for a decade, 2 decades. I mean, it's genius. I don't know if that's really great, but it's genius. That's what they do. But what I'm saying is they run so many of these models. And right now, I can tell you right now, even in the field of psychiatry, there are hundreds of promising things that look so promising right now. This might be the next cure for schizophrenia. This might be the next cure for the cognitive aspects of schizophrenia. This might be the next thing for PTSD, etc. Right? We even talked about it in the last episode. We talked about hallucinogens. We talked about, MDMA, etc. MDMA looked like it was going to be the next big thing, and it fizzled out, right? I mean, we talked about why. I'm not saying it's not a helpful compound at all, but there's a lot that goes on between cell line studies, animal studies, and human studies in all the different phases. So we just have to be careful, is what I'm saying. So let's move on to the second half. And this one, right, I can get very specific. Let me play another clip. This was from another portion of the same episode with Mel Gibson. This is just to give you context. He's giving this time, instead of saying my 3 friends and leaving you in the dark and being kind of vague, this is his own personal experience at the Amen Clinics, AMEN. So while I'm talking, you can go Google and type Amen Clinics, see what Mel Gibson is referring to. So let me cue up this clip, and I'll shut up this one's short, probably just about a minute, but let me cue this up. You take a listen, and then we'll have some commentary on this.
Which is a very horrible place to be. And
when you say that, what do you mean by you've spent a long time in your animal brain?
You're in flight or fight.
Right.
All the time. You don't even sleep. It's like really not a good place to be. And if anybody looks at you the wrong way, you want to bite them.
Yeah.
And sometimes you say and do things that are socially unacceptable. And, I went and got a brain scan by this guy called Daniel Amen, who's this brain guy. He's against all psych meds and stuff, but he thinks let me have a look at your brain. And he put a radioactive tracer in me.
Whoa.
And to photograph my brain.
Right,
He works
MRI,
with a lot of,
right?
Yeah, he works with a lot of football players and guys who've had brain injuries. Man, it's thirsty in here. But, so he looked at my brain and he was like, and he opens the file, and I'm in there with the guy, and he looks up and he goes, "Are you okay?" And he goes, first he went like this. And I said, "What?" And he went, "Are you okay?" Like that. And I said, "Yeah, I think so." And he came over and he sat next to me, but very slowly and cautiously. And he says, "No, you're not." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You got the worst case of PTSD I have ever seen." And I said, "You mean like even worse than guys in war and shit like that?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he says, "You're not okay."
Jesus Christ.
And I was like, I started to well up, like, no, I'm not. It's like,
oh boy.
And it was, he had a very miraculous and great remedy for it, which was to eat a bunch of fish oil, vitamin B complex, and get into a hyperbaric chamber for 40 sessions. But make sure you do at least 2 or 3 a week.
Oh.
It fixed my head.
Really?
Yeah, it got me out of that wacky place,
So it was something to do with nutrition and oxygen and...
Yeah. And your brain is neuroplasticity. He explained neuroplasticity to me and how, okay, you could get brain damage and like holes in your head and all, concussion. I used to play rugby. And I've been knocked out on the field a couple of times,
That explains a lot. Yeah.
And so.
All right, guys. So, oh boy. So you've heard me reference places to be careful of out there, right? I said, be wary be skeptical when you're out there in the field trying to get help for yourself, for your loved ones. So you heard it right there, right? This one was a different story, right? This wasn't about friends saying, I went to an Amen clinic, walked in, showed me a beautiful scan. So what he's referring to is a SPECT scan, SPECT, a SPECT scan. And looked at the scan, told me I had PTSD. Okay. And you heard the back end of that. Said, take some vitamins and get into a hyperbaric chamber for oxygen and, fix my brain. Again, I'm so perplexed at what is the allure from celebrities across the board. Mel Gibson, Joe Rogan enabling Mel Gibson, Oprah, Dr. Phil, PBS, all these places. What is their infatuation with the Amen clinics? Okay, for those of you who don't know, let me give you the context, okay? Some of you may be already aware because this is a well-known psychiatrist, a well-known mental health practice across the United States. Essentially, he's now become a social media, or just, I didn't say social, just a media presence, right? The Amen clinics they're famous for having a proprietary methodology of imaging your brain with a SPECT scan, okay? And I'll queue up some images while it's worth queuing up. I'm going to do this while we're talking, okay? That can essentially, be careful how they say this because they've changed their website over the years. I think they've had to tone it down a little bit, but essentially can guide or assist in making the psychiatric diagnosis, basically making very broad sweeping strokes of statements saying that they've left the rest of the field of psychiatry in the dust, and that, again, the system is holding them back. They don't want to share, a lot of their proprietary secrets and methodologies, et cetera, yet they claim they have so many peer-reviewed articles about how great and wonderful their methodology is. I'm going to just say it, guys. It's concerning quackery. It really is. I'm just gonna say that at this point. Okay. For those of you who are still on right now with me, right? We'll flash this up. We'll do this later in a second. Go on their website. Go to the Amen clinics. And here's the thing, right? I want to be cautious in how I say this. If you were to go to an Amen clinic, right? They will have therapists. They will have psychiatrists who prescribe you medications. So they will have the standard fare clinicians that you would expect to see at your local mental health clinic. So that part I want to be clear on, right? There is an element of standard of care. And that's why if you ask folks and if you ask people who have been to the Amen clinics, right, you have to have a fair and balanced discussion with them because some of them have received standard of care treatment, meaning they are there. So Mel Gibson, I'm going to say he's incorrect. He says this Dr. Daniel Amen guy, he's totally against psychiatric meds. His clinics have psychiatrists who prescribe meds. I know some folks who work there because they're all over the place. And I've met people who have worked there in the past. I've had plenty of patients who've left from that practice to come to see me, and I've read their treatment plans after I've received their records. So this isn't speculation. Mel Gibson's wrong. People get actual standard of care treatment. They get therapy. Look on their website. They do therapy. They have psychiatrists who prescribe Prozac, Zoloft, Lexapro, blah, blah, blah. So first off, he doesn't even know what he's talking about. So I want to be clear on that, right? Which is, again, concerning. You have someone on there making all these healthcare claims, literally not knowing even how the Amen clinics work and operate. So they look on their website. They have regular med management. They have regular services too. So here is what's different, though, about the Amen clinics versus a typical clinic. Most often, you don't have to, but most oftentimes they are pushing brain imaging or SPECT scans. Okay? And typically, you go through a diagnostic evaluation like you would at a regular clinic, but then you usually do a series of 2 SPECT scans, one kind of pre-treatment during the diagnostic phase and another one later, almost to do like a pre and a post. And because SPECT scans are not considered standard of care, roughly, and the price will vary depending on your locale, whether you're at the Chicago location, the Los Angeles location, the Florida location, talking about $4,000 roughly, give or take, depending on your locale. $4,000, you're going to pay pretty much the bulk of, at least, out of pocket for some pretty pictures. Okay. I'm just going to be very frank. Okay. You can go look up in any legitimate reference, journal. People have gotten so fed up with this phenomenon that, like, over time, at first, maybe 15, 10 years ago, there was just vague, oh, we're not sure about it yet. But at this point, the APA and other societies, other journals have just come out and said, look, essentially, this is modern day phrenology. This is pseudoscience. There is no standard of care. There is no standard of care to say that one can use a SPECT scan for diagnostic purposes. It's just not the case. And again, am I anti-research and anti-cutting edge? No, I used to be a principal investigator. I worked in the process of trying to advance breakthroughs and discoveries. I was involved in helping some of these medications come to market, and come to fruition so they could be available to the public. It's just this notion, right? This just condescending notion that they've unlocked the secret, they have some secret, and apparently no other place in the world, no other hospital systems, no other national healthcare systems in the world feel that this is even remotely close to being considered a standard of care intervention or diagnostic tool. And trust me when I say no one from their clinic would ever subject themselves, and I think I said this verbatim in a previous episode, would ever subject themselves to somebody giving them 10 random SPECT scans and saying, tell us what the exact diagnosis is blindly, without any kind of context. No history, no details. And just make sure you get it right with a high rate of accuracy. It's just not going to happen because they can't. Because they literally can't. Okay. Again, am I coming across as harsh? Yeah, a little bit. Okay. It would be a different story if I said, hey, we're going to interview you. And hey, from our interview alone, we have high suspicion that, like, you probably have, PTSD. And if you want, we can do this supplemental imaging to give us some further insight into if, this fits the pattern we see somewhat consistently in people who have PTSD. And by the way, it's something that might cost you $100. Maybe insurance would. You get some nominal cost, and then let's see. Because at the end of the day, right, if the picture looks better, but you don't feel better, what does that do? If you feel better and they can find any minor change, and trust me when I say, on 2 different days, when you do a SPECT scan, there's going to be some differences. If you say, I feel better, my trauma is better, my depression is better, my anxiety is better, they're going to pull out the second scan and be like, oh, yeah, look, see, there's some minor differences here. Good, you're good to go. I mean, this is just nonsense, guys. There is no well-run study. There is no acceptance of this practice as standard of care anywhere. Yet people are being charged $4,000. Go look at Reddit. Go look on YouTube videos about this and people who are promoting this. And you will read the comments. It's very depressing, guys. And my heart breaks. My heart breaks because I read this stuff. I get a combination of sad and angry at the same time. That's why I get so heated. You see me heated. You see these comments from people across the nation. God, I wish there was an Amen clinic near me. God, I wish I could save. I'm going to ask my grandparents to give me my inheritance early, and I'm going to use it on that. Okay? If this was just for celebrities, and if this was just for the rich, I could give two craps about rich folk spending $4,000 on 2 SPECT scans. I don't even know how much they would charge for 40 sessions of hyperbaric oxygen therapy, because that's not covered by insurance it's covered for certain things in the medical field. In the field of psychiatry, hyperbaric oxygen therapy is not standard of care for anything. So trust me when I say any hyperbaric oxygen sessions, let alone 40 of them, you're paying cash. You're paying cash for that. You're paying cash for the SPECT scans. The cash doesn't stop there, guys. The cash doesn't stop there. Do you know what a huge source of revenue is for the Amen clinics across the country? That's right, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. Let's give a round of applause. Of course. Of course. You knew it was coming. Can I get an amen, KG? That's right. You can get an amen from me. Of course. Brain MD is Dr. Amen's line. Brain and Body Power. Brain and Body Power Max. Brain and Memory Power Boost. And guess what, guys? If it's inconvenient to have to click add to cart, you could subscribe to the subscription model. So when Mel Gibson, one thing Mel Gibson did get right was talking about how there was a push for him to just take some vitamins and supplements. But you know what? Not the regular ones. Not the regular vitamins and supplements from the Vitamin Shop or GNC or Jewel or wherever you go, Osco, Walgreens, even not that stuff. Why would you do that, Mel? You want Brain MD's line of Brain and Body Power, Brain and Body Power Max. KG, $104.95. That's a lot of power. You are right. That is a lot of power. That is a lot. That is a lot. You are correct. You are correct. And I didn't even get started, right? I didn't get finished, right? KG, you don't have to worry. Look, this is the landing page for the supplement section on Amen Clinics. 30% off this week. You don't have to worry that it's $104.95. It's 30% off. You're going to get it for like 70 something bucks. I just soothe your fears, KG. When your psychiatric clinic is having Black Friday and New Year sales, I don't know. That's a red flag to me. Are they there to be your healthcare provider, or are they there to sell you something? When your physician's website is promoting a bunch of sales for Black Friday and for New Year's and for blah, 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 what kind of clinic are you going to? We didn't even get into his books. Books upon books. I told you, KG, I'm here for you. I got your back, bro. 30% off. I knew you'd feel better. See, I had it ready. I knew you were gonna say something. I had that queued up just for you, KG. Guys, what are they doing? And look, okay, is this just me being harsh? No, what did I say? I have patients who have come from the Amen clinics, and it's a mixed bag. Like, let me be balanced. I have some patients who say, look, oh yeah, they were helpful to me. You know, the psychiatrist was nice. They prescribed me standard of care stuff. They gave me, Lexapro for my anxiety. I did therapy with the therapist. We did cognitive behavioral therapy. And on top of it, they did these SPECT scans. I'm like, okay. And you're better? Yeah. Like, yeah. But they're like, yeah, you know what? I don't need to be on all these nutraceuticals and all these things. And I'm stable enough. I just want to focus on regular standard of care. I'm like, yeah, sure. Smart move in my opinion, because you're doing better. Whatever. You don't need all that extra stuff. Great. So I do hear some stories like that. But I also hear the stories of, hey, I got all these spec scans. They told me that, their success rate is this high. I don't feel any better. And I've been taking all these nutraceuticals. I've read the books. I've got the scans. Now I'm 20 grand in the hole and I don't feel good. And now on top of it, I'm 20 grand in the hole. And then they get pissed off. They get pissed off when I say, I might actually have a different diagnosis for you. Or I think you do have that diagnosis, but I have different treatment suggestions. Or you didn't really need those scans. I could have told you that you're depressed because you feel depressed. You just told me you're depressed. You don't need a scan to tell me that. You just told me that. Should I say this? Chuckles says, I have a car battery and jumper cables treatment going for $50. That's more affordable than the hyperbaric treatment. That's more affordable than some of these supplements. Chuckles, you are actually you're offering quite the steal there, Chuckle. So here's the concerning thing, and back to some seriousness, guys. But you know what? So beyond the differences in what I've seen, right? Here's the thing. When I read the treatment plans, like the actual documents of what's in their medical record, they are the only clinic I've ever seen in my personal anecdotal history, whereas part of the treatment plan is making sure that you go get some of those Brain MD supplements. That's in the treatment plan. Hey, take your Lexapro, do your therapy, journal, meditate, and make sure you talk to the front desk about getting your Brain MD supplements. Don't you think it's a weird conflict of interest? A little bit predatory when it comes to suffering? And here's the thing, right? I'm gonna end after this in terms of my criticisms of this particular practice, because trust me, I've actually seen worse. I've actually seen worse near me. So we really want to go into create probably a Netflix series if someone actually was if someone here knows how to get screenplays and things to like Netflix and these original documentary places, Wondery for like podcasts, hit me up. I got stories for you. Okay. But anyways, but look, I've met physicians who've worked there before. And I think there's a whole variety of physicians there. I actually think I've met a couple who are just so nerdy. I'm saying that in a good way. Like they're so nerdy and they're so fascinated by cutting edge technology and research. Like they really love the spec scan component, and they're really kind of highly involved in that aspect of it. And they're wanting to write journal articles about it. Okay, all right, power to you, man. Go nerd out. I've met others who are there primarily to drink the Kool-Aid. And they really believe in the not validated approaches that they take. Go click under services and you will see, holy crap, how many services they offer. More of a variety than the oxygen chamber and spec scans that I've listed. They got a ton of stuff. I think they got something called like memory boot camp. I don't know, whatever. But some have drank the Kool-Aid. There's others there who get paid well and they just try to keep their head down, right? They kind of know what's going on, meaning they're not dumb. They know what's going on. They know what they got themselves into, and they just try to lay low. And when reasonable, they'll recommend certain things, just so that they don't get heat from their supervisors. Why aren't you recommending enough spec scans, oxygen interventions, blah blah blah? But they don't go overboard. But they kind of they lay low and they're kind of quiet. They just want to make a good paycheck. So there's a variety of people. So I don't want to vilify the people there. I think everyone's there just trying to make a living. I get it. Ray, I hear you. Ray, you said, so you're doing some TMS. It might be nice to get scans of your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex before, during, and after. Yeah. Yeah. I don't see that to me, that's different. What you're saying is a very different concept, in my opinion, than what happens over there. Okay. You're trying to literally change the sensitivity of your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex with a magnet, right? You're changing thresholds of sensitivity and then hopefully seeing a change in activity level pre and post treatment. Meaning, like, we kind of know what we're aiming for, right? There's a pre and post, like, there's kind of an endpoint that we want to see. And for you, like, it would make sense, right? And again, it comes down to access, right? Cost and access. If it was cheap and affordable, right? Or let's say you were at an academic center. Some academic centers with TMS actually do that because they want to collect the data to then publish, right? That's what you have to do at academic places. They want all their physicians to be publishing things as part of their employment there. That's why, they're a little bit laxer on the volume of patients you see because they give you time to do kind of stuff like that. And if you were at a well-renowned academic center that pushed TMS, they might actually be doing that for you at an academic TMS facility because they're interested in that kind of stuff. So again, you see my attitude, right? Did I vilify imaging? No. I think when it makes sense, and again, when it's affordable and we're not milking people and we're not making you dip into your savings and go broke, image away, my friend, right? But again, to say to somebody, hey, you've been through so many different doctors and psychiatrists, come to the Amen Clinic, we'll image you, we'll get it right. I'm so, like, put it this way, I want you to hear this, everyone who's still listening before we go into Q&A and open time. There's nothing more than I would love to have like a genetic test, a blood test, or an imaging test to just say, this is the diagnosis. So I am not against that. I would love for that. That would save the patient a lot of grief. It would save me a lot of time and energy. It would make every psychiatric consultation and intake so much better. Like, would I love the thought of me being able to press a button, do a scan, and say, hey, you know what? You have PTSD, you have a touch of OCD, and ADHD. Versus me saying at the end of 75 minutes or 90 minutes of a complex case saying, hey, look, I'm telling you things that you already knew, like you're struggling with depression that hasn't lifted for 2 years. You have chronic, persistent, and pervasive anxiety. I do think, you do have some features of borderline personality. You have trauma as an overarching diathesis because of all the trauma you've gone through. So there's a complex trauma component in addition to that. We have to figure out how to strategize with some coping strategies for the chronic self-injury. It's more like, right, I'm listing a cluster and a combination of human phenomenology versus being able to say something discrete and specific, right? And that's frustrating to patients, right? Because they want just to hear one sentence. I got blah, blah, blah disorder. But this is the state, this is the nature of psychiatry. I don't even know. I don't even know if we're going to get to the point where we're going to be able to nail it down, because the human spirit, the human experience, the human psyche is just so nuanced and so complex. I don't know. There's a few things. Bipolar disorder is probably the closest thing we have to nailing down genetic links. So I do have hope that for a few things that are a bit more, how should we say it, structurally, organically, I guess, caused or driven as a primary factor, I think maybe there's going to be hope we could get a little bit closer. But some of the other stuff, I'm not sure. I wish, but I'm not sure that we ever will, because so many of those things involve abstract concepts and existential concepts. I don't know that we're going to ever be able to link it purely to biology, except end manifestations. So it's complicated, guys. But like I said, in summary, it just bothered me. It bothered me enough that I pulled an audible. This wasn't going to be the original topic I was going to be talking about today, but last night when I saw this stuff, I know the episode's a couple days old. It really rubbed me the wrong way. And I love Braveheart. I love William Wallace. Why, William? Why'd you have to do that to me, Wallace? Why did you have to get me so worked up last night, Wallace? So, Mel Gibson, oh my gosh. This gives me flashbacks to the Tom Cruise days of when he lost his mind on mainstream media, right? And it bothers me. It bothers me when people who have so much influence and then get on a platform with the reach of so many people just try to give like false hope, try to be intriguing. I don't know what it is. It just bothers me, man. Just like people are suffering. Doesn't Mel Gibson understand? Most of us are struggling in some way, shape, or form, whether it's financially struggling, you're struggling with your mental health, you're struggling with your physical health, you have caregiver burnout, you're not sleeping enough, you're working too much, you don't have enough free time, you don't have financial freedom. Not trying to sound pessimistic, I'm just saying there's so much going on in our country. There's so much going on in our neighborhoods. There's so much going on within our families. There's so much going on in your personal life. And then it's just like, man, it's like, why do people have to throw gasoline on that? False hope, selfish comments, predatory practices. You know, we lucky few, yeah. And here's the funny part, right? I mean, and I'm going to end it with this, right? Here's the funny part. Again, Mel Gibson, Joe Rogan, right? They can afford to mess around, and they have the luxury to go to the Amen clinics and spend $4,000 on spec scans and buy expensive supplements, get a 5th or 6th or 7th opinion, to go get customized couture treatment if they wanted to ever get them or their loved ones the febendazole and methylene blue and all this stuff, right? And then for them to sow the seeds of these conspiracy theories, us against them. Us? What do you mean us? I'd love to be in that us, in the privileged, right? The lucky, the few, the 1%. It just that part is what also fascinates me, right? They milk that for their base, yet they're in the privileged few. It just fascinates me. It just fascinates me, guys. So, anyways, I know I'm going off on tangents, but what else is on your minds, guys? So I know we're already past the hour. But, you know, I had a lot of anger. Thank you. I appreciate you. For those of you who have listened, for Ray, for KG, for Chuckles, for Dennis, this was cathartic for me. This was cathartic. So I get so pissed off. So what does that say about me? Obviously, I'm not letting it out in healthy ways. I get so pent up with this. I gotta analyze my anger. So, Chuckles, interesting. See, I wasn't aware of that. So Chuckles says, thank you for the comment. So yeah, keep throwing out these last minute comment, guys, when we wrap up. Just more open forum time. Now, Chuckles says, I remember Howie Mandel being asked what he takes for his mental health. He commented he wouldn't say because he wants those in need to get professional help. Oh, that is, wow. That is, I'm going to have to go look that up. Chuckles, remind me when I'm going to go and answer Ray's question here, but was Howie Mandel, was he the one who had OCD? I can't remember, some type of fear of contamination, or am I misremembering people in the media? But you tell me if that was the case. But no, that's fascinating. I mean, that's like that. I think that shows you insight into someone's soul a little bit, right? I mean, that's not wanting to impose or put the spotlight on themselves, right? I mean, no, that's a fascinating anecdote. So Ray, look, Dextro, What OCD. Okay. No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Juggle. So dextromethorphan, right? It is not about the dissociation. Okay. The dissociation in itself is not the key to produce an antidepressant effect. Okay. And that was a controversy because look, what the dextromethorphan buprenorphine combo is trying to do, it's trying to mimic what ketamine kind of does, meaning like it's trying to alter and modulate glutamate transmission in your brain. It's also trying to indirectly trigger brain-derived neurotrophic factor and promote that. But it's not the dissociation itself that leads to the antidepressant property. The dissociation is a side effect. Okay. And obviously, if you're street abusing ketamine or super mega high doses of dextro, I guess, that's a wanted effect, I guess. But for the purposes of antidepressant effect, it's actually not the key to the antidepressant effect. It's really more about the downstream effects of modulating glutamate and GABA balances, as well as BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And here's what I mean, okay, just to get more specific, right? It used to be really pushed when ketamine first got wider, acceptance in off-label use with intravenous ketamine. When the nasal spray ketamine started getting used when it was FDA approved, there was this notion out there. It was really pushed, and I'm saying right now, it was really pushed even by these ketamine clinics, right? And fascinatingly, actual science and ketamine clinics' opinions were at odds. Okay. Because so here's the history, right? IV ketamine clinics predate the nasal spray ketamine that came out through Johnson & Johnson. And IV ketamine is a cash cow, right? Because IV ketamine is not FDA approved. So it's a cash only kind of thing, right? And there was this weird phenomenon where, they were really, not all, so I want to be careful, not all, but many were saying like, oh, you need the dissociation. That's how you know it's working, right? And some of those places were saying that because they were also charging you extra, saying, oh, in addition to us, pumping you with some IV ketamine, you should get some ketamine-assisted, psychotherapy. Let's take advantage of when you're dissociating and have them do therapy during your dissociative state to make even further progress. Now, look, let me be careful about how I say this, right? If you are getting the side effect of dissociation, is there a way you can leverage that? And if you're gonna dissociate, you might as well try to make the most of it, right? And is there any validity to, like, maybe in a dissociative state, you have more of an ability to maybe access and talk about certain topics that you're typically insecure and vulnerable about and putting walls up about, and you typically wouldn't even want to explore this? Yeah, sure. Sounds logical to me, and I could buy that, right? So I'm not this like dogmatic purist about like, oh, don't ever do that. I'm saying, of course you could leverage that. And maybe for some people you can leverage the dissociative states and make progress. That's different than saying you have to dissociate in order to get the antidepressant effect. That's the important thing, right? And how do we know that that's not the case? Because we now have enough data. This is not pharma. This is the NIH. The NIH, what the hell? They don't have any skin in the game of the ketamine game. Okay, NIH basically said, look, we have like Carlos Zarate and these people who just work at the NIH who have been able to say, look, there is no evidence that you have to get the dissociative effect of ketamine to produce the antidepressant effect. It's just not even the case. They've even, at this point, this is exciting news, they've even isolated the metabolite of ketamine. So the metabolite of ketamine, and again, I don't want to go overboard, so I don't want to be a hypocrite to what I said earlier. At least for now, in early models, they see the same antidepressant signals that they see in ketamine without the same dissociative signals. So to add another interesting layer, right? So they think that maybe now in the future, almost think of it as like maybe, again, keywords, maybe if this pans out, maybe they can design more like a ketamine 2.0, meaning can you produce that faster, more rapid acting antidepressant effect, but maybe without as much of the dissociative effect? Because sadly, anywhere from like 40 something all the way up to like 70 something % of patients will get some degree of dissociation when they take these drugs like, ketamine, esketamine, or if your doses of like something like, dextromethorphan is too high, you're overdoing it. Because that's what makes those treatments cumbersome, because of IV ketamine and ketamine, especially nasal spray ketamine, causing so much sedation and dissociation. You have to stay at the clinic for 2 hours. The Auvelity combo of bupropion, dextromethorphan, it's so mild compared to that. And it's not nearly as, for lack of a better term, like they're not exactly the same thing. Also not going to be as potent, I guess, is the best way to put it, as what IV ketamine would do. That like you can take that at home and you don't have to be monitored. But, if one were to overdo it, theoretically, yeah, you could push it to the point, if you go overboard, that you could induce some degree of dissociation. But again, bottom line, although many people dissociate when they take these like glutamate modulators, that in itself is not what lends itself to have an antidepressant effect. Hopefully that was helpful. I didn't want to blow you off earlier with a like, no, don't worry about it, it's not, like, kind of answer. Like there's context to the answer I wanted to give you. And that is a widely asked question. And depending on who you ask, you're going to get a variable answer, right? Because this whole thing, right? Dissociative assisted, psychedelic assisted therapy has already kind of ballooned into its own little cottage industry. There's money to be made there. Okay, there's money to be made. Okay, last question. Ray says, and if anyone else has other questions, throw them out there. Says, one last question about depression. What do you think about off-label Adderall for increasing dopamine production retention? Well, here's my comment on that, Ray. We've done plenty of studies with I think at one point, one of the more recent ones was like Vyvanse, which I know is not the exact same thing as Adderall, but we've done studies with Vyvanse, methylphenidate, which is Ritalin, even Adderall. Those studies have been done where they have been used to be combined with other FDA-approved antidepressants, meaning like there were even like up to phase 3, like so right before FDA approval. Right at the crux of FDA approval, almost got FDA approved, where they would add those types of stimulants to your standard fare Prozac, Lexapro, Zoloft type of meds, versus a group who would just get like the standard SSRI. And, unfortunately, those trials didn't pan out, but here's the commentary, right? There was enough evidence to say that there are going to be a cohort of people, because it's not like the group that got the stimulants, like, oh, none of them got better. It's just that there was not enough of a differential in signal, right? Meaning the two groups didn't separate enough for the FDA to feel comfortable to give it the official FDA label. But that also means that there were people in the group who would get the stimulants who did get better. So my own and this is my personal opinion. Okay, this is not the stance of standard of care or any professional society, but I do think there are going to be a percentage of folks. Hard to predict who those are going to be, but there is a percentage of folks who could likely benefit from probably low dose, of a stimulant type of med for their depression. Because look, there's no argument that stimulants can enhance your mood and help with depression. That's well established. I mean, we know that for a fact because look, if you remember some of my earlier episodes, I mean, the field of mental health and psychiatry used to just prescribe flat out amphetamines to improve people's mood. Now, the question is the trade-off, right? Side effects, cardiac health in the long run, some controversy about tolerance, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So there's a trade-off, but I think if you simplified it to a compartmentalized question, can it help depression? The answer is yeah, it can. It just, how effective will it be for each individual? That's variable. You know, what is it worth the risk-benefit ratio? Variable. But yes, theoretically it can. And I think in some challenging cases of depression, I have utilized that strategy with mixed results. Okay. So KG, I'll answer that, and then I'll go to something. So something, Oscabar. I'll get to your question in a second if you hang out for a minute. Okay. So KG says bupropion is a norepinephrine stimulant for depression. Yes or no? Yeah. So correct, KG. So interestingly enough, KG, bupropion is categorized in its own category of antidepressants, right? It's actually not a SSRI. It's not a it's not a SNRI. So it's not like Zoloft, Prozac, duloxetine, etc. So it is considered a norepinephrine and ever so slightly, a dopamine reuptake inhibitor. So you can call it a N as in Nancy, a N lowercase DRI. Some people call it a DNRI or NDRI, but ever so slightly a mild dopamine. And what kind of things affect norepinephrine and dopamine? Certain stimulants. Not all. Some stimulants are primarily dopamine based, but certain stimulants are norepinephrine, dopamine modulators, right? So interestingly too, if you were to ask like a chemist, you know, like a blind test, and you didn't label it bupropion or Wellbutrin, and you said, what family or what category of chemical would you be looking at here? And even from a structural standpoint, a chemist might actually tell you, oh, I'm looking at some kind of stimulant type of compound. Because even from a structural standpoint, it kind of is. So you bring up a very good point. That is actually the chemical nature of bupropion. And here's the thing, KG, go look up right now. Go look up the side effects of bupropion. And what do you find? Interestingly, unlike SSRIs, very minimal rates of sexual side effects. Okay, I'm not going to say zero, but I mean, it's minimal. Okay. Dry mouth, headaches, constipation, insomnia, might get you a little too jazzed up and increase your edginess and anxiety or irritability. What does that sound like? What does that side effect profile sound like? I just said dry mouth, constipation, headaches can get you revved up, a little more anxious, can't sleep at night, weight loss, appetite suppression. Let me throw those in. What does that sound like? Does that sound like the profile of an SSRI that causes rampant sexual side effects, erectile dysfunction, right? Low sex drive, sometimes drowsiness, nausea, diarrhea. So the opposite stuff, right? And what does that sound more akin to? Sounds like the side effects of a stimulant. What happens when you take Adderall, Ritalin, Vyvanse? Headaches, dry mouth, constipation, insomnia, edginess, more anxious for some people, not all. But, right? Appetite loss. That's why we worry about kids who take stimulants, especially elementary school kids. Oh, did you skip your breakfast, your lunch? Now you're losing weight. So weight loss, appetite. So look what I just said, KG. So that's a very good point. Very good point. It's even the side effect profile reads similarly to the side effect profile of a stimulant. So this isn't me trying to nerd out and give you something esoteric. It's just that's how they are. Something Oscabar. What do you think about GABA natural meds for OCD? I would have to go look. Put it this way. I can tell you confidently, GABA is not going to be one of your mainstream choices for OCD. The best thing for OCD, I'm going to say it right now so people can hear. The best thing for OCD, as a general comment, is typically either ERP, exposure response prevention therapy, or CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm saying, if you asked me head to head, what has more effective outcomes, I'm telling you right now, it's ERP and CBT more than medication interventions. I'm a prescriber telling you ERP and CBT are superior to the outcomes of meds. Okay. I didn't say that meds are useless, and you probably will need to augment the CBT and ERP in severe and challenging cases of OCD. But as a general comment, therapy interventions are more effective. Now, to your comment though, let's say we move into the realm of medicinal interventions, right? It's going to be SSRIs at pretty high doses. So in particular, most people are going to probably need high doses of SSRIs. If SSRIs are not effective enough, medicinally speaking, if you want to tier the evidence, there's probably evidence, and I know this is not going to sound nice, not a fan of it either, but I'm just telling you the evidence that adding low doses of antipsychotics probably has the next highest tier of evidence. So some OCD specialists will actually add low doses of antipsychotics to the SSRI, okay? After that, you get really kind of murky tiers of evidence, okay? I'm not saying useless, but, in terms of the supplement realm, I would say one of the supplements that has at least some mixed evidence, keywords mixed evidence, is something called NAC, N-A-C, N-acetylcysteine. Which typically is used as the antidote to Tylenol overdoses, interestingly. And some people in society just use very low doses of NAC as like an antioxidant to try to capture free radicals. But very high doses of N-acetylcysteine probably has more evidence from a kind of naturalistic supplement over-the-counter non-prescription option, probably more than GABA modulating meds. But you will find some evidence of some GABA modulating agents that has some keywords, mixed evidence of some help in some OCD and compulsive disorders. KG, yeah, exactly. Like Abilify would be an example. Like there's some evidence of people using low doses of Abilify, Seroquel, etc. So some people do use low doses of even that. Again, it's all about trial and error and risk benefit ratios. So, but an interesting phenomenon. OCD is very fascinating. People are interested here. We could talk about OCD on a future episode if you want. So, and lastly, let's wrap up. Oh my gosh, we're getting to midnight. We've been on for an hour and a half. Time flies with you guys. I appreciate it. When you guys are engaged and interactive, I could just keep blabbing. So Justin Furstenfeld, lead singer for Blue October, his open book tour, the story of how he became sober and got help for being bipolar is amazing. He's very open about people getting the help they need. Justin, okay, for Blue October. I'll have to look at this. So to look up, I'm going to have some homework, Chuckles. You guys give me some good ideas. I'll have to look at Justin Furstenfeld, and I'm going to actually look into Howie Mandel as well, just because that comment that's very very noble way to kind of respond. I like that Howie Mandel quote that you gave above, Chuckles. So thank you for that. And lastly, and then we'll wrap it up, Chuckles says, CBT 100% better than meds, works for me. I'm trying NAC. Cool. I'd like to hear how that goes, Chuckles, because I've used NAC quite a bit for patients of mine, and kind of like the research shows, right? I've had some patients of mine say, it's crap, and then I tell them, well, let's stop it then. Let's not waste your time. Let's not have you spend more money. Fortunately, NAC's not too expensive, right? So, and it wasn't. To be clear, I don't have a Dr. Kim's brand of NAC. I tell them, just find the cheapest one you can find. That's my advice. And I will even go on Amazon searches for them, because the thing with NAC too, I tell my patients, what you have to be careful if you take NAC, and I'm going on a tangent here, is some of the brands of NAC, they like mix it with all these other things. And I have to warn my patients, because when you're trying to mimic the research studies for NAC that had some success, most patients were taking on the very low end, and I would say that's probably the lowest, it's like 2,000, 2,400 milligrams, but some were taking as high as even 4,000 milligrams of NAC in some of those research studies. So the problem is some of the brands of NAC out there contain other compounds and chemicals. Like I've seen some that will have, tons of vitamin B or some other like magnesium. And I tell them, whoa, you got to be careful because, we're not giving you, 600 milligrams of NAC or 500 milligrams of NAC. We're going to be giving you like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. So you will then also be like quadrupling or tripling all those other elements, right? So that's the other nuance that's important, is that I'm very explicit with my patients that if they're going to try this off-label NAC, to make sure they get the NAC that basically just has NAC and not all these other kind of things, just to make sure you're also not going to be at risk of like some kind of vitamin toxicity or other toxicities, right? So it's just that weird nuanced thing, but I've learned over the years where that is important to kind of educate my patients on before we, have them go and buy some. So that's why sometimes if it's someone who's just kind of overwhelmed by this, I'll even walk them through and maybe try to find one that's affordable and only has that NAC in there. So I keep saying last one, but I keep getting pulled in. KG says, have you heard of kava for OCD? Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with kava itself. Now, I'm not familiar, so I never want to talk about something I'm not really, I'm not just going to make up stuff. So kava, I'd have to look at kava for OCD. What have you heard? I just know kava in particular. Kava has some GABA, G-A-B-A, GABAergic properties, meaning it is a GABA modulating compound, right? So I actually don't doubt that. And so that's why I do believe, I don't think it's going to work for everybody, but I know that some people who have anxiety, just general anxiety, panic type symptoms, they've reported that when they've taken kava, that they have felt somewhat of a calming effect. And again, this is not about prescriptions versus OTCs, prescriptions versus holistic. It's just, I just wish there was better literature and better regulation of kava and all these things. But I believe that there are going to be some folks who will probably feel somewhat of a calming effect because, again, it's not like these things are Tic Tacs. These are things that have some medicinal properties and they have some side effects, just like anything else you put in your body, right? So, I wish I could be a bit more specific for patients. It's just, I don't know that a lot of these holistic companies have the incentive to run like very sophisticated studies. I really wish they would. It would, because look, the success rates of like antidepressants is not very impressive, right? I would be shocked if a holistic company couldn't replicate some of the success rates of treating more vaguer, entities like and syndromes like generalized anxiety, so I really wish they would try to, run some more sophisticated studies. So, but yeah, no, kava is an interesting compound. I get so many patients who are on kava, ashwagandha. I feel like St. John's wort's kind of already like past its limelight. That was popular for a hot minute back more in the 90s and 80s, but I feel like, yeah, lately it's been more kava and ashwagandha. So Ray says, I'd be interested in long-term benzo withdrawal syndrome in a future episode. Yeah, I could look into that. I mean, I already have a few episodes on, but more so, yeah, like acute withdrawal, like in the beginning phases in the first week or two. But yeah, I know that's an area of struggle for some folks where people will have struggle for, even with like things like your REM cycle of sleep and insomnia issues. I mean, I've had patients who've struggled for, even over a year sometimes to get their sleep cycles back in order. And obviously having lack of sleep becomes a risk factor to then go back to using benzos or alcohol or et cetera. So yeah, there definitely is people who have prolonged effects of coming off of benzodiazepine. So, okay, I'll jot that down on my list, guys. So, all right, guys, it is 12:09 a.m. in Illinois. Even for me as a night owl, I'm probably not going to sleep just yet, but I'm going to go wind down for 30 minutes or so and then go to sleep. So I hope that you other animals and insomniacs go get some rest as well. It was lively tonight, guys. So thank you. See, look at this. Look at this. I truly meant it cathartic. I went from being pissy earlier with all my pent up anger to now smiling and being more mellow. You guys were my benzos tonight. You guys were my catharsis. So I appreciate you guys. This is partly why I've been doing this. This is a good outlet for me. Instead of having all that pent up rage, you guys get to witness my moaning and complaining and whining. But I appreciate you guys being along for my cathartic ride tonight, being pissed off at Mel Gibson of all people. Gosh, Braveheart, why did you do that to me? All right, you guys have a good night, and I'll catch you on the flip side, and we'll see you guys on Tuesday night for the next episode of the Insomniacs Livestream. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you again for all your support, as always.